problem with unrestricted submarine warfare for the Germans was that you couldn't tell necessarily who you were sinking. The Germans could cut them off from the outside world with submarines. They could force the British to leave the war.
So submarines had to be used in a very inhumane way.
And give civilian crews the chance to surrender and abandon ship before sinking it.
More than a century after the guns fell silent, World War I is still giving up its secrets.
A global war. One of the bloodiest and most destructive in history. The First World War.
Hidden beneath fields, locked inside forgotten rooms, and buried deep underwater are discoveries that no one expected to find. Eerie artifacts, lost weapons, strange facts, and haunting reminders of lives frozen in time. From underground tunnels and secret labs to sunken ships and blood-stained relics, here are the strangest discoveries from WW1 and why they still matter today. 1. The secret underground lab filled with skulls. Deep beneath the trenches of northern France, soldiers discovered something that seemed pulled from a horror movie. During tunnel digging, troops stumbled upon an old underground room that had been turned into a lab. The walls were lined with human skulls, carefully arranged in rows like a creepy library. Medical tools lay scattered across stone tables, covered in dust and dirt. Historians believe this space was used as a secret medical research room, though no one knows exactly what happened there. Some evidence suggests doctors did experiments on dead bodies to understand blast injuries and develop better surgery methods. The skulls themselves were hundreds of years old, likely taken from old burial sites that covered the French countryside. The researchers needed samples to study head wounds, a common injury when bombs exploded overhead in the trenches. 2. A 12-year-old soldier saw combat. When Sidney Lewis walked into the recruitment office, nobody questioned the boy who claimed to be 19. In reality, Sidney was only 12 years old, making him the youngest proven British soldier of World War I. His small size and young face should have given him away, but the recruitment officers faced enormous pressure to fill the ranks. They needed soldiers, and they weren't looking too carefully at birth certificates. Sidney joined the East Surrey Regiment and found himself shipped to the Western Front before his 13th birthday. He served on the front lines at the Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. While men twice his age broke down under the mental strain, this child soldier lived through the nightmare of trench warfare. He witnessed death on a massive scale, experienced gas attacks, and lived through bomb strikes that could drive grown men insane. His mother eventually discovered where he had gone and raised such a fuss that the army had no choice but to send him home. Sidney returned in 1916, but the war had already changed him forever. He carried those memories for the rest of his life, though he rarely spoke about his experiences. His story wasn't unique either. Thousands of underage boys lied their way into uniform, though few were as young as Sidney. His case shows the chaos and desperation of wartime recruitment, when the machinery of war took anyone it could reach, regardless of age. 3. The German submarine UC-61 wreck. The North Sea holds countless secrets from the Great War, but few discoveries proved as important as finding the German submarine UC-61. This mine layer vanished in 1917 after setting out on what should have been a routine mission. For nearly a century, its fate remained a mystery. Then, in the early 2000s, divers located the wreck lying intact on the seafloor, perfectly kept in the cold, dark waters. The submarine still contained the bodies of her crew, frozen in time at their stations. Personal items remained scattered throughout the vessel, offering a close look into the daily lives of German submariners. Letters from home, photographs of loved ones, and half-eaten meals painted a picture of ordinary men caught in unusual circumstances. The discovery answered long-standing questions about what happened during that final voyage. Evidence suggests UC-61 struck one of its own mines, a tragically common fate for these vessels. The blast would have been instant, giving the crew no time to react or escape. The submarine sank quickly, sealing the men inside their steel tomb. Today, the wreck serves as an official war grave, protected by international law. Divers can visit, but must treat the site with respect, knowing that real human beings lost their lives there. The UC-61 reminds us that the war touched every corner of the globe, and the ocean floor became a graveyard for thousands of sailors from all nations. 4. The pigeon that saved nearly 200 men. In October 1918, American forces found themselves trapped behind enemy lines in the Argonne Forest. The unit, known as the Lost Battalion, faced constant German attacks with no hope of help. Worse still, friendly artillery began shelling their positions because headquarters didn't know where they were. The situation seemed hopeless until a soldier released their last carrier pigeon.
Homing pigeons were used a lot during World War I, and they were called war pigeon.
A small bird named Cher Ami.
There was one British homing bird called Cher Ami.
The pigeon carried a desperate message asking the artillery to stop firing on their location. But the Germans saw Cher Ami take flight and opened fire, trying to shoot down the tiny messenger. Bullets tore through the air as the bird climbed higher, fighting for height. One round blasted through Cher Ami's chest, another destroyed one eye, and a third nearly cut off a leg that held the message container. Any normal creature would have fallen from the sky. Somehow, Cher Ami kept flying. The bird traveled 25 miles in just 25 minutes.
This bird flew 25 miles in 25 minutes to deliver a note.
Despite terrible injuries. When Cher Ami landed at headquarters, medics rushed to help, though they doubted the pigeon would survive. The message reached the artillery commanders just in time. The shelling stopped, and the Lost Battalion held their position until relief arrived. Nearly 200 men owed their lives to one brave pigeon. France awarded Cher Ami the Croix de Guerre for heroic service, and American medics fitted the bird with a tiny wooden leg. Cher Ami survived the war and lived another year before finally dying from the wounds. Today, the stuffed and mounted pigeon remains on display at the Smithsonian, a small hero who did the impossible. 5. Trenches preserved at Browndown. Most World War I trenches disappeared long ago, filled in by farmers or washed away by weather. But at Browndown, in southern England, an entire training trench system survived almost untouched.
Battlefields. It's an incredible reconstructed First World War landscape.
These weren't combat trenches, but rather practice grounds where soldiers learned the brutal skills they would need in France. The preservation of this site offers researchers a clear look at how armies prepared men for modern warfare. Walking through these trenches today feels like stepping into a time machine. The dugouts remain intact, showing where soldiers would have sheltered during practice bomb strikes. Communication trenches still connect the various positions, showing the complex networks that defined trench warfare. Even the fire steps, where soldiers would have stood to shoot at pretend enemies, survive in remarkable condition. Wooden supports have rotted away, but the basic structure remains. 6. The German U-boat UB-122. Another submarine discovery shocked the underwater history community when they found UB-122 lying off the English coast. This vessel met a different fate than UC-61, and the circumstances around its sinking revealed the brutal efficiency of anti-submarine warfare. The boat had been depth-charged by British destroyers, and the violence of that attack remained clear in the wreckage. The submarine's hull showed massive holes from the blasts. Depth charges were designed to crush submarines like tin cans, and UB-122 proved they worked exactly as planned.
The U-boat skipper watches and confirms the explosion through his periscope, and a loud cheer grows up from his crew.
The crew had no chance of survival once those charges went off around them. Water would have rushed in at incredible pressure, flooding the rooms within seconds. The wreck now rests broken, but largely whole, proof of both German engineering and British firepower. Exploring UB-122 gave insights into late-war submarine design and the increasingly advanced technology both sides used. The vessel carried modern torpedoes and featured improved dive abilities compared to earlier models, yet none of these upgrades could save it from the British anti-submarine campaign. 7. Chemical weapons discovery. Construction workers in Belgium got the shock of their lives when they dug up dozens of rusted chemical weapon shells.
The norm against chemical weapons has been subjected to repeated and fundamental challenges.
Even a century after the war, these deadly devices remained dangerous. The discovery triggered a major emergency response, with military bomb disposal teams carefully removing the corroded cylinders. Similar finds happen regularly across former battlefields, a toxic legacy that continues to threaten lives today. World War I marked the first large-scale use of chemical weapons, and both sides used poison gas with horrifying results. Mustard gas, chlorine, and phosgene turned battlefields into death zones where soldiers drowned in their own fluids or suffered painful burns. The weapons were so terrible that most nations later banned them, though stockpiles remained buried and forgotten. The problem is that these old shells never truly become safe. The chemical agents inside remain deadly, and the corroded containers can leak or explode without warning. Farmers still plow up shells regularly, and occasionally someone gets injured. Special teams work year-round to locate and dispose of these weapons, but experts say it will take centuries to find them all. 8. The license plate coincidence. Archduke Franz Ferdinand's murder.
The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo was the match that touched off the conflagration of World War I.
Triggered World War I, making his death the most important moment of the 20th century. Years later, someone noticed something strange about the license plate on the car he died in. The plate number was A111118, which could be read as Armistice, November 11th, 18. The exact date the war ended more than 4 years later. The coincidence seems too perfect to be real. Historians have looked into this claim extensively, and most conclude it's either a misreading or a later invention. The car may have had different plates, or people may have remembered the numbers wrong. Yet the story continues because it captures something about how we view history. We want to believe that major events connect in mysterious ways, that the universe somehow knew how the war would end before it even began. Whether true or false, the license plate story reflects humanity's need to find meaning in tragedy. 600,000 people died in a war that started because one man was shot in Sarajevo. The license plate coincidence suggests some hidden order to the chaos, a cosmic joke, or perhaps a warning. Even if the story is completely made up, it tells us something important about how people remember and process historical trauma. 9. The HMS Nottingham wreck. When divers found the British cruiser HMS Nottingham, they discovered a ship that told the story of submarine warfare's growth. The Nottingham had been torpedoed in 1916 and sank with major loss of life. The wreck lay deep enough that it remained largely undisturbed for decades, keeping details that would have vanished from shallower sites. The discovery gave valuable information about both the ship and the weapons that destroyed it. The torpedo damage revealed how devastating these weapons had become. Early torpedoes were unreliable and relatively weak, but by 1916, they could break a warship's back with a single hit. The Nottingham's hull showed massive structural failure spreading from the impact point. Engineers studying the wreck could see exactly how the blast moved through the ship, tearing apart walls and flooding rooms faster than crews could react. Personal items recovered from the wreck brought home the human cost. Sailors' belongings, from pocket watches to photographs, reminded everyone that these weren't just ships, but floating communities. Men lived, worked, and died aboard these vessels, often with little warning. 10. The soldier's bedroom, frozen in time. Perhaps the most emotionally powerful discovery came when renovators opened a locked bedroom in the village of Belabre, France. Inside, they found the room of Hubert Rochereau, a French soldier killed in 1918, kept exactly as he left it. His parents had sealed the room after receiving news of their son's death, unable to bear changing anything. For decades, nobody entered that space. The room contained everything a young man would have owned in 1914. His uniform hung in the closet, his books sat on the shelf, and his personal items remained scattered on the desk. Photographs showed a handsome young soldier, full of promise and life. The bed was made, waiting for someone who would never return. Walking into that room meant stepping directly into the past, experiencing the war's impact on ordinary families. How many other parents locked doors they couldn't bear to open? How many rooms were eventually emptied out, the memories packed away or thrown out? The bedroom serves as a memorial not just to Hubert, but to an entire generation lost to war. 11. Shelter in the Italian Alps. High in the Italian Alps, where snow still refuses to melt even in summer, soldiers once lived inside the mountains themselves. During World War I, Italian and Austro-Hungarian troops fought a brutal war at extreme altitudes. To survive avalanches, artillery fire, and freezing winds, soldiers carved shelters directly into solid rock. Decades later, climbers and historians began stumbling upon these hidden shelters. Some were surprisingly well preserved. Wooden bunks still clung to the walls. Rusted cooking tools sat where someone last left them. In a few places, boots, uniforms, and handwritten notes were found frozen in time. What makes these shelters so strange is how peaceful they look now. Birds nest where machine guns once stood. Snow gently covers rooms that once echoed with explosions. These discoveries remind us that WW1 wasn't only fought in muddy trenches, it was also fought in places where humans had no business being at all. And while these frozen shelters feel quiet and lonely today, the discoveries found inside them tell a very human story, one that continues far from the Alps. 12. Britain recruited an elephant for war work. Yes, World War I involved tanks.
What makes the tank so important in the First World War is that for the very first time, you get the combination.
Horses and trucks, but it also involved an elephant. When manpower became scarce in Britain and horses were already stretched thin, an elephant named Lizzie was recruited in the city of Sheffield. Lizzie wasn't sent to the battlefield, but she played a crucial role on the home front. She hauled heavy scrap metal, machinery, and even artillery parts through industrial streets. Years later, photos and records of Lizzie resurfaced, surprising historians and the public alike. Seeing an elephant calmly pulling war equipment through English streets feels almost unreal. It's one of those discoveries that sounds made up until you see the proof. 13. World War I stretcher bearer's bloodstained armband. Among the most haunting WWI discoveries is something small, a bloodstained armband worn by a stretcher bearer. Stretcher bearers were soldiers tasked with carrying the wounded off the battlefield.
And we're looking at our little section here all about the stretcher bearers from World War I. They're often regarded as the unsung heroes.
They often worked under fire, unarmed, stepping over bodies and through shell holes. When one armband was later discovered, still stiff with dried blood, it told a story without saying a word. This wasn't just decoration. The Red Cross symbol was meant to offer protection, but in reality, stretcher bearers were often targeted anyway. The blood on the fabric wasn't just from one man. It could have come from dozens. This discovery hits hard because it reminds us that WWI wasn't just about fighting. It was about trying, desperately, to save lives in conditions where saving anyone felt almost impossible. And sometimes, the most powerful discoveries aren't massive weapons, but personal items left behind. 14. A female relative's military badge. Another strange discovery came in the form of a military badge belonging to a woman, found among wartime belongings. During WWI, women officially served in roles like nursing.
A big place that women contributed in terms of the military effort was through nursing,
clerical work, and logistics. But many badges were given to female relatives of soldiers, recognizing service, sacrifice, or loss. When one such badge resurfaced decades later, historians traced it back to a woman who never fought, but whose life was deeply shaped by the war. The badge may look simple, but it represents waiting, worrying, and sometimes grieving. It reminds us that WWI wasn't just fought by soldiers. It reached into homes, families, and everyday lives. 15. The trench fortress at Hill 60. Hill 60, located in Belgium, looks like a quiet rise in the land today. But beneath it lies one of the strangest trench fortresses of WWI. Hill 60 wasn't a natural hill. It was made from railway construction debris before the war. When fighting began, both sides realized its strategic importance. Soldiers dug deep into it, creating tunnels, bunkers, and underground chambers. Years later, excavations revealed collapsed tunnels, unexploded mines, and personal belongings still buried underground. Some areas were so dangerous they had to be sealed again. The discovery of Hill 60 showed just how far soldiers went to control a few feet of ground. It also revealed how much of WWI is still hidden beneath the surface, literally. And Hill 60 wasn't the only place where forgotten stories came back to light. 16. Native Americans served without citizenship. One of the most eye-opening facts rediscovered about WWI is that nearly 13,000 Native Americans served in the US military, even though they weren't officially American citizens at the time. This wasn't widely discussed for decades. Many Native American soldiers enlisted out of loyalty, tradition, or necessity. Some became scouts. Others served as medics or infantrymen. Their service helped inspire the later recognition of Native Americans as US citizens in 1924.
Tyler Button writes, what role did Native American people take in the war? Well, Native Americans were not considered to be US citizens.
When service records and medals were rediscovered, historians began re-examining how much these soldiers contributed and how little credit they received. It's a strange discovery, not because it's shocking, but because it was forgotten for so long. 17. African American troops fought in segregated units. Another long-ignored discovery came from old military records and photographs. Over 350,000 African Americans served in WWI, mostly in segregated units. Most were assigned to labor roles, but some combat units made history, especially the 369th Infantry Regiment, known as the Harlem Hellfighters. Fighting under French command, they earned respect, medals, and a fierce reputation. For years, their story was barely told. When historians began uncovering letters, photographs, and battle reports, it became clear how important their role truly was. The strange part isn't that they fought bravely, it's that the world almost forgot. 18. World War I munitions still being found. Even today, farmers across Europe still uncover WW1 munitions while plowing their fields. Shells, grenades, and bombs emerge from the soil like metal ghosts. Some are harmless, others are still deadly. Entire bomb disposal units exist just to handle unexploded WW1 weapons. Each discovery is a reminder that the war didn't really end in 1918. It just went quiet. And beneath the ground, it's still waiting, which makes one early wartime problem even more shocking. 19. Soldiers initially had no gas masks. When chemical weapons were first used in WW1, soldiers had no protection at all. Early discoveries and accounts revealed that men stuffed rags, socks, or cloth soaked in urine over their faces to survive gas attacks.
Person served as a field doctor in the trenches of the First World War and is commonly given credit for an invention that saved thousands of lives.
It sounds ridiculous, but ammonia in urine could slightly neutralize chlorine gas. Later discoveries of these makeshift masks show how unprepared armies were for modern warfare. Proper gas masks only came later, after thousands had already suffered or died. It's strange, horrifying, and oddly human all at once. 20. The Tunnel of Death. One of the most chilling WW1 discoveries is what historians now call the Tunnel of Death. During underground warfare, soldiers dug tunnels beneath enemy lines to plant explosives. In some cases, tunnels collapsed, flooded, or were countermined, trapping men inside. Years later, excavations uncovered tunnels filled with bodies, tools still in hand. These men didn't die charging a trench. They died underground, in darkness, far from help. The discovery of these tunnels reminds us that WW1 wasn't just fought above ground, but beneath it, in silence. And that's what makes these discoveries so unsettling. World War I may feel distant, but it's still rising out of the earth, the ice, and forgotten boxes, quietly reminding us that history never really stays buried.